Okay, good morning. Today I'd like to continue doing some reading from Forest Recollections, reading some more stories of the Kruba Ajahns, the Thai forest meditation masters, and today I'd like to read from the chapter on overcoming bodily suffering. And I just wanted to mention before I start to read that in this particular chapter there are some pretty strong practices that are pretty tough practices that are described, and some pretty tough language that's used. So I've chosen to share this not really as an encouragement for people to necessarily be emulating these practices, because they might be not quite appropriate for many of us, but I've chosen to share these stories just because I find them very inspiring to read about how these really advanced practitioners worked with bodily suffering. Okay. Although fear forced many an inexperienced monk off the Tudong path, the 10 monks under study here all passed this obstacle, some easily and others after much difficulty. But even more daunting than fear was the risk of catching jungle fever and other diseases. It was not uncommon for monks or novices to die from illness during their early years of wandering. Whether the ailment was serious or minor, we see the same pattern of response. Sometimes monks sought cures through traditional remedies and native healers. When these failed, they sought to heal themselves through meditation or relied on their great powers of endurance to carry them through. In the early years of Tudong practice, many monks had not yet learned how to heal themselves. Sometimes young Tudong monks received treatment from local healers, Ma Pi, literally spirit doctors. 2 wandering monks, Ajahn Lee and Ajahn Juan, recalled how they were saved by native healers when they fell ill in remote areas. In 1932, the 26-year-old Ajahn Lee was spending the rains retreat with Ajahn Mun at Wat Jadilung in Chiang Mai. A few days after the retreat ended, Ajahn Mun sent him to meditate alone on top of Thumb Hill in Lamphun, where Ajahn Mun had once stayed. When Ajahn Lee reached the foot of the hill, he camped there for 10 days. One afternoon, while sitting in meditation, he heard a whispering voice telling him he had to go to the top of the mountain. After climbing the mountain the next day, Ajahn Lee scouted the area and found a deep spring with crystal clear water surrounded by the heads from old Buddha images. Ajahn Lee recalls that the spring was protected by a local belief. Quote, "They say that a person who falls into the spring won't sink, and that you can't go diving down under the water. People in the area consider the whole mountain to be sacred." Ajahn Mun had told Ajahn Lee that a powerful spirit dwelled in the mountain, but it would not harm him or disturb him because it was acquainted with the Dhamma. The next day, Ajahn Lee had nothing to eat. Quote, "That night I felt faint. The whole mountain seemed to be swaying like a boat in the middle of a choppy sea, but my mind was in good shape and not the least bit afraid." The next day he did walking and sitting meditation in the area around an old abandoned sanctuary. Although there was a village about 4 kilometers away where he could have gone for alms, he vowed not to eat until someone brought him food. That night he suffered from severe stomach pains and a fainting fit. Just before dawn, he heard something or someone moving up the steep slope toward him. He could not tell whether it was human or animal. Quote, "I heard huffing and panting sounds outside the sanctuary. At first I thought it was a tiger, but as I listened carefully, it sounded more like a human being. That side of the mountain, though, was very steep. Not too steep to climb up, but I can guarantee that it was too steep to go down. So who would be coming up here? I was curious, but didn't dare leave the sanctuary or my glot until it was light outside." Ajahn Lee waited until dawn to step outside. He found a laywoman about 70 years old sitting with her hands raised in respect. She had some red sticky rice wrapped in a banana leaf, which she put in his bowl. She also gave him some roots and pieces of bark. She told Ajahn Lee, "Take this medicine, grind it down and eat it while making a wish for your health, and your stomach ache will go away." After he finished eating the glutinous rice and the roots and bark, he chanted some blessings for her. Then she left, disappearing down the west side of the mountain. The following day he was well enough to travel back to Chiang Mai to be with Ajahn Mun. And the next section is on facing pain. If traditional herbal remedies and local healers failed, the monks would try to heal themselves through meditation, or what they called dhamma osot, spiritual medicine. Unlike textual study, meditation practice was an oral tradition passed down through the centuries from teacher to student. No formal course of study, no classroom or textbook prepared the Tudong monk. Although their initial attempts to deal with pain and illness through meditation proved exceedingly difficult, monks eventually became proficient. While living in the forest, Ajahn Mun trained monks in his own way. This was not the way of scholars. He taught by personal example. He drew upon his experiences, and his teachings reflect his vitality. Ajahn Mun told his disciples that if they wanted to understand suffering, the first noble truth, they must look into the situation at hand. Quote, "Wherever a problem arises, it must be settled right there. Where suffering lies is right where non-suffering will arise. It ceases at the place where it arises." In the Ajahns' opinion, the most difficult monks to teach were the Maha monks, monks with third-level Pali studies or more, who came to challenge his teachings. A typical example is Mahapin. When Mahapin began to practice meditation under Ajahn Mun's guidance in 1917, he had doubts. Quote, "Unlike me, Ajahn Mun has never studied the Pali texts. He couldn't possibly have superior knowledge. I have passed the 5th level Pali exam and probably know the Dhamma better than he does. I wonder if what he is teaching me is correct." But in Ajahn Mun's opinion, the Pali scholars had a lot to unlearn before they could proceed along the spiritual path to liberation. As he saw it, the purpose of Tudong practice is to train the mind, not to follow a text. To instruct these disciples in handling pain, Ajahn Mun often used forceful and hard methods to shock them out of their habitual attitudes. His favorite techniques were insults, humiliation, and shouting at his disciples. If a monk avoided facing painful sensations, for example, Ajahn Mun would scold him, quote, "Keep moaning, anyone can moan, even children can moan, if it serves a purpose, but here it doesn't serve any purpose at all other than to annoy those good people who are unflinching in the practice. So you shouldn't moan out of weakness. You're a meditation monk. When you act like this, who can bear to see it? If you were a child or an ordinary person, there wouldn't be anything wrong with it because they haven't received any training. They don't have any knowledge or understanding of the various ways to contend with the pain, such as contemplating it. But you think you already know everything. Yet when trouble comes along, such as this illness, you can't find any methods or tactics that will help you care for yourself. You just go to pieces. This won't do it at all. You're ashamed of yourself and your fellow meditators." Ajahn Mun's approach was to cajole a monk into having sati, and then using it to control and supervise the mind. Once the mind was unified in deep concentration, a new kind of awareness would emerge. The monk would be able to accept his pain and suffering with equanimity. Compared to his teacher Ajahn Sao, Ajahn Mun was fierce and strict. During the late 1930s, while Ajahn Mun and 3 disciples were staying in a forest in northern Thailand, one of the monks, a Maha, contracted malaria, a disease against which no existing medicine was effective. The monk suffered intensely from its attacks. Ajahn Mun believed that instead of trying to relieve physical symptoms, monks should go to the root of distress and cure their minds. He instructed ill disciples to observe the pain without reacting, for thereby they would realize the truth of suffering. But he found this Maha's will too weak to follow his instructions. He proceeded to scold him sternly. Quote, "You are called a Maha, but where is the knowledge you studied from the scriptures right now? What a waste of time and effort, your Maha title. The purpose of learning is to make knowledge available in time of an emergency. But what kind of knowledge is yours? It's practically useless. You are going to die, and all that knowledge which you took so much time to gain cannot be called on to help you. What was the purpose of your studying? I am not a Maha. I don't even have the lowest grade. But what I do have with me are the 5 basic meditation themes taught to me by my preceptor on ordination day. It seems the more you learn, the weaker you become." Ajahn Mun was teaching the Maha monk to develop mindfulness and concentration, to use the mind to contemplate the body and its illness, and to meditate on discomfort until painful sensations left the mind. If the monk had sufficient mindfulness, his mind could withdraw from the body. The Dhamma, Ajahn Mun was also saying, cannot be found on bookshelves. To really see it, a monk has to look within his own body and mind, because both happiness and suffering arise right there. Ajahn Mun's harsh criticism reflects his low opinion of monks who have engaged exclusively in book learning. He seems to have believed that a strong intellect often conceals emotional weakness, and he showed little compassion for a monk's suffering if he thought it came from self-pity or self-indulgence. This particular Maha monk wept when he was scolded, but then Ajahn Mun, still striving to bring his disciple to realization, changed his technique to the opposite extreme of gentleness and encouragement. For the next few days, he softened his tone and assured the monk he would recover soon. His gentle, cheerful, and even motherly consolation produced a soothing effect on the sick monk, who recovered steadily during the next few months. And the next section is on persevering. Like many novices who started out by accompanying a teacher, Ajahn Tate learned about the importance of perseverance by observing experienced wandering monks. Others, such as Ajahn La and Ajahn Mun, already possessed this quality. Still others, like Ajahn Wayne, developed it through long meditation practice. In 1916, Ajahn Tate was practicing under Ajahn Singh, Ajahn Mun's oldest disciple, at a deserted wat in Tat Pao in Udon Thani. Ajahn Singh was suffering from malaria, and although he was feverish throughout the rains retreat, he continued to teach and train Ajahn Tate. When the retreat was over, Ajahn Tate and his teacher departed. There were no roads then, and they had to walk through mud and wade across the streams and paddies. When the fever attacked, Ajahn Singh took shelter in a hut in the fields or lay in the shade of a tree. In the morning he would go on an alms round, despite the fever, to feed his young pupil. Ajahn Tate learned that regardless of his condition, a Tudong monk rises in the morning, follows the path to the village, and makes an alms round. Meditation monks were known for their ability to bear disease and illness bravely. Ajahn La has left a detailed account of his marathon encounter with jungle fever. For example, he kept his meditation practice going during intermittent attacks of jungle fever while wandering with Ajahn Mahabua in November 1946. From Pupon Hermitage, Sakonakon, where Ajahn Mun was residing, the two monks walked along trails or ox cart tracks through the forest and paddy fields until they reached an abandoned wat in Prat Kampu village. They stayed there to meditate. Although Ajahn La had an attack of malaria every 3 or 4 days, this did not stop him from serving Ajahn Mahabua, his senior. To train Ajahn La, Ajahn Mahabua gave him many tasks to perform. Quote, "You must fetch water and fill up the water containers for washing alms bowls and for my bath. Fill the kettle and the jar with drinking water. A lay person will wash the bowls. Leave them outside to dry and then take them inside. No need to assist me bathing, sweeping the kuti, or preparing the bedding. I'll do these things myself, since our kutis are quite far apart. Meditate rigorously. Except when necessary, don't speak to me, but don't assume that I dislike you." Despite his fever, Ajahn La performed the rigorous daily duties that Ajahn Mahabua assigned him. Quote, "For almost a month, water for washing and drinking was brought in from the stream about 120 meters from the hermitage. I started carrying the water at 4 o'clock in the morning, stumbling through the dark since there was no torchlight. Ajahn Mahabua meditates day and night, but I'm usually seized by fever around midday. Although the fever dies down in an hour, the headache persists. I can eat a little. Every 3 or 4 days I'm overtaken by fever, but at night it's a little better." Ajahn Mahabua eventually got a hold of some quinine tablets and brought them to Ajahn La. Not familiar with modern medicine, Ajahn La says he, quote, "swallowed the 6 tablets all at once. All day the ears felt out of whack, so I skipped the meal, just let the drug take over. The fever disappeared for 15 days, then it came back. But I continued to fetch the water, sweep the grounds, and do walking meditation, regardless of the recurrence. If it were typhoid and I kept on like this, I probably would be dead." Ajahn La had not quite recovered from malaria when Ajahn Mahabua moved them 1/2 kilometer deeper into the forest, but they still went to Pratkampu village for alms, and Ajahn La continued to fetch water from the same stream. Quote, "The villagers built me a platform big enough to spread a mosquito net about 80 meters away from that of Ajahn Mahabua. It must be my karma that some of the small and smooth round sticks they used for the platform were cut from Nam Kliang trees. My skin is allergic to them. After 3 or 4 days, my face became so swollen it almost concealed the eyes. When Ajahn Mahabua went to inspect Ajahn Law's platform and found the Nam Kliang sticks, he asked a villager to remove them and replace them with safe ones. Ajahn Law was equanimous. He did not blame the villagers. Quote, all things considered, they had no bad intentions. During this time, the leaves had fallen off, so they couldn't tell by looking at those sticks which were right. They just gathered any smooth, round sticks. They built the platform in a hurry and didn't have time to make the roof and sides. In the morning, both the mosquito net and the glot were wet. I just let them hang there to dry out. Under such conditions, it is little wonder that Ajahn Law suffered from chronic fever during the 2 months that he stayed with Ajahn Mahabua. Ajahn Law, however, felt that he was a burden to his teacher and decided to find solitude elsewhere. Hearing Ajahn Law's reason for leaving, Ajahn Mahabua suggested with a laugh, go to the prairie area of Sakonnakhon, pitch your glot and mosquito net in the middle of a pasture, do the walking meditation in the blazing sun. The open air might be more suitable to your body. He wrote a letter to Pan, a fellow Dhammayut monk at Pongyam village, asking him to accommodate Ajahn Law. So Ajahn Law departed. A villager accompanied him for a short distance to be sure he was going in the right direction. Ajahn Law says he did not know whether to take Ajahn Mahabua's advice seriously or not. Ajahn Mahabua, however, was not joking. He had known a number of monks from the towns of Ubon, Royet, and Mahasakaram who could not adapt to living in the forest or withstand the diseases. He knew that those who were born in town or who lived surrounded by fields and open places had a hard time adjusting to the forest environment. It took Ajahn Law half a day to walk to Pongam village. There he gave Ajahn Mahabua's letter to Pan. Pongam was Pan's home village, and he was back for a visit, staying at a deserted wat. Pan asked his father to assemble the villagers. 30 people showed up. They decided to build a shelter for Ajahn Law at Tum Nokata Hill. They believed the hill was inhabited by fierce Bangbot spirits, and they may have asked Ajahn Law to stay in there to test the depth of his practice. Quote, they built me a hut with a roof and walls made of straw. They also made a latrine with a ditch for urination, and they cleared a path for walking meditation. There was a well for water in the area. The forest was full of tall sal trees. The village was about 1 kilometer away, a good distance to go for alms. Although the villagers in Sakonnakhon were generally attentive to Tudong monks, Ajahn Law preferred to be self-reliant. Quote, the fever attacks every 2 or 3 days, and then goes away for a few days. I can eat all right, but the headache persists. When I'm overtaken by the fever, the villagers want to come and look after me, but I won't let them. They want to visit daily to grind the herbal medicine, but I say no. I want to be alone when ill. I only ask them to provide medicinal roots in a rock so I can grind them. Ajahn Law stayed for a month. Then, although the fever persisted, he decided to proceed to Poet Cave. It appears that Ajahn Law treated his illness with what Ajahn Chah calls right view. Quote, if it heals, it heals. If it doesn't, it doesn't. That, says Ajahn Chah, is how Tudong monks saw things. Ajahn Law departed early one morning in the company of some villagers who showed him a path along the foothills toward the east. Quote, actually, on the day of my departure, I still had a fever, but I didn't tell them for fear that they would be worried. After the villagers returned, I practiced mindfulness while walking. Barbet birds were singing. All the leaves had fallen off, leaving the treetops bare. Free from worry, I walked mindfully. Despite the raging fever, I kept up the walking meditation. Coal birds were calling far away. In the evening, Ajahn Law arrived in the vicinity of Owlfield village. Here he ran into Ajahn Fun, who was leaving the wat of Wingfield Stupa with 4 other Tudong monks on their journey to Dane Cliff Cave. In addition to the other Tudong monks, Ajahn Fun was accompanied by 2 local soldiers. Kneeling on the ground to pay his respects, Ajahn Law briefly told Ajahn Fun his story. Quote, so you've been walking all day with a fever, said Ajahn Fun. I sympathize. Go and stay at Wingfield Stupa Monastery. It's deserted now. I'll have these 2 soldiers go with you. Then Ajahn Fun addressed the soldiers. From here to Dane Cliff Cave, I'll be all right with these monks. Soldiers, make sure that tomorrow morning Sergeant Ampon gives this monk an injection. Turning to Ajahn Law, he said, don't leave until you've recovered. Ajahn Law bowed gratefully to Ajahn Fun, and the 2 parted. Ajahn Fun headed south with his monks, and Ajahn Law went north with the soldiers who carried his Tudong gear for him. By then, it was getting dark. Quote, the fever was still raging. It was a 10-kilometer walk. We took a shortcut along a trail only wide enough for a mouse. It was pitch dark and we had no torchlight. I couldn't even see where I was stepping. That was up to Kama. I was meditating on loving kindness for fear that I might step on a snake. They arrived at the village of Wangfield Stupa around 9 p.m. The soldiers took Ajahn Law to the deserted Wat and returned to their quarters. Late at night the fever diminished, but the headache remained. All night long Ajahn Law meditated lying down. In the morning he found that water for drinking and washing had been provided for him. He swept the floor and went on alms round. A layman followed him back and gave him 11 quinine tablets with instructions from the sergeant. This time Ajahn Law did not take them all at once. After staying there for 11 days, Ajahn Law felt strong enough to move on. When he told a villager that he was leaving for the cave, the latter objected, quote, now that you're cured, you want to run away from us. This comment made Ajahn Law laugh, and he reminded the lay people that both of them would gain merit from his seclusion. Quote, I'm one of Lumpur Mun's guilty ones. He warned those who sought solitude that if they made no progress in meditation, they wouldn't be allowed to spend the retreat with him. He thinks that we simply wander for the fun of it, and Ajahn Fan also told me to continue wandering when I recovered. Lay supporters all gain merit in complete seclusion in a cave, in a forest, or on a hill, and you too will gain merit. We both lose nothing. If Ajahn Mun heard that I went wandering and then stayed in a Wat, he'd think that I simply wanted to get away from the teacher to hide, and that I lacked courage. He'd condemn me and refuse to teach. It would be my loss. Upon hearing Ajahn Law's plea, the villager said, we'll let you go then. Please extend some loving kindness to us. The local belief that lay supporters would gain merit from monks' meditation was common in the Lao and Wan traditions. Monks accordingly felt they had a responsibility to practice diligently. Ajahn Tate alludes to this duty in a comment he makes about his meditation in 1924. Quote, increasing my exertion also raised my appreciation for the villagers' goodwill. It seemed to follow like the shadow its subject. I was very aware that my existence rested in the hands of the villagers, and I therefore continued my meditation practice to repay my debt to them. I became certain that my meditation efforts during this time completely fulfilled the obligations of my indebtedness. Ajahn Wayne also provides a good illustration of a Tudong monk's dedication to his practice, even in sickness. In this case, it was jungle fever, which Ajahn Wayne caught in 1918 when he was meditating in the wilderness under Ajahn Mun's guidance. Wandering alone in the north, Ajahn Wayne would meditate until the fever died down, but it kept coming back every 3 to 5 days. The fever reached its worst one day while he was walking from Payao to Lampang in the rain. Quote, it was a difficult journey, he recalls. I had to cross streams and walk through narrow canyons and dense forests. There were leeches everywhere. Coming upon a village in the evening, he saw a spirit shrine on the outskirts of the hamlet that was big enough for a person to lie down inside. Ajahn Wayne took shelter in it for a night. Quote, I used the bathing cloth to sweep the floor clean and then spread the cloth over the floor. I put the cloth up. I stepped outside and bathed in a nearby stream filled by the rain. There was solitude at night. I folded the outer robes into a pillow and lay down. Having rested, I chanted some prayers and radiated loving kindness to all sentient beings. I alternated walking meditation with sitting meditation. I heard tigers calling nearby and could tell that they were big ones, big enough to kill cattle. They kept howling non-stop. When one paused, another started up, and so on. It was like a group of people shouting at each other, back and forth. Late at night, it was so cold that I could hardly sleep. When Ajahn Wayne resumed his journey in the morning, he felt weak. His head felt heavy, the way it does when a fever comes on. Finding no hamlet in the dense forest, he pushed ahead. After a few more hours of walking, he felt utterly exhausted and realized that he was indeed feverish. The walk had been too much for his sick body. He stopped in the shade of a tree beside the path. Quote, I put down the glutton bowl and sank to the ground out of sheer exhaustion and illness. I don't know how long I slept. The sound of a strong wind swaying the tree branches woke me. Lightning and thunderstorms were everywhere, and the sky was now full of dark clouds. The wind and storm became more violent, and the fever hadn't gotten any better. Then it began to rain. I couldn't set up the glot since it would have been blown away. I didn't know where to find a shelter to get out of the wind and rain. Seeing there was no way out, Ajahn Mun got up. With meditative concentration, he prayed to the Triple Gem and made a vow, quote, "I have devoted my life to the Triple Gem. If I have sufficient barami, let me remain in the monkhood until I'm released from suffering. Please keep the rain away from where I am." Then, after radiating loving kindness to the deities, the Nagas and the Garudas, he prayed, quote, "I'm on my way to Lampang, now sick and tired in the middle of the forest, no strength to move forward. Please have mercy. It may not be proper to stop the rain, but please change the direction of the wind so that it won't rain where I am." After this prayer, Ajahn Mun concentrated his mind and again radiated loving kindness to all sentient beings in the cosmos. Then, quote, "What a miracle. In the midst of the downpour, the wind started blowing the branches above me in a new direction. The wind shifted and the rain moved about 40 meters from my spot. The rain continued for a long time. After it let up, I still hadn't recovered from the fever. I lay down again with nothing for shelter. I woke up late at night and found the whole body wet. I didn't know whether it was because of mosquito bites or sweating. The fever went down and I felt lighter and thirsty. I took the kettle to the stream to get some water." Before he continued the journey, Ajahn Mun calmed his mind and once more meditated on loving kindness. And the last section that I'll read is called Healing Through Visions. Ajahn Mun was known for his ability to conquer serious ailments through concentrated meditation. He once told a disciple, quote, "Last night I healed my illness. During my meditation, a dhamma phrase appeared in my nimitta vision, yayi tapati ati jacho. Just as I did once before when I was ill, I continued to meditate. After the pain went away, some kind of dhamma would appear in my nimitta. I therefore seek no medicine when I feel ill. To count on medicines or doctors alone would go against my taking refuge in dhamma." Visions and signs do not occur to all meditation monks, however. This depends on an individual's temperament. As the Tudong monk explains, quote, "Visions and signs arise from mundane jhana, states of concentration. With some people, no matter how refined a level their minds attain, visions and signs won't appear. With others, the mind may gather in a flash for a brief moment, and all sorts of visions and signs will appear." Among Ajahn Mun's disciples, Ajahn Fun, Ajahn Li, and Ajahn Juan were predisposed to having signs and visions appear in their meditation. Ajahn Fun cured himself by means of a vision during a reoccurrence of malaria in 1932. At the time, he was wandering with a fellow monk on near Bamboo Canal village in Korat. Ajahn Fun tried all kinds of medicine, including quinine, but nothing worked, so he turned to Dhamma practice. He sat in meditation until his mind became one-pointed. Quote, "In his vision he saw something leap out of his body and stand in front of him. Concentrating his mind, he looked at this thing and it turned into a deer jumping into the stream. It then leaped out and turned into a big elephant and forced its way through the forest, noisily breaking tree branches before it went out of sight." In the morning, Ajahn Fun's fits of fever had all disappeared. Ajahn Mun taught his disciples to analyze their visions and dreams for clues about the workings of karma. Many Tudong monks accepted their illnesses and other things that befell them as the fruits of previous karma, which had to be patiently examined and endured in order to break the chain of causality. Ajahn Li, for example, made several references to a caged dove that appeared to him in dreams and visions. During the 1937 Rains retreat, when he was staying at Prawn Canal Hermitage in Chantaburi province, Ajahn Li suffered from stomach pains that no medicine could cure. He sat in meditation through the night. Around 4 a.m., a nimitta appeared in his meditation. In it he saw, quote, "a bird cage containing a thin, famished dove. The meaning was this: I had once kept a pet dove and had forgotten to feed it for several days running. This karma was now bearing fruit, causing me to have gastritis. Therefore, there was only one way to cure it, to do good by way of the mind." Because his vision appeared when he was ill, Ajahn Li took it as a message that he should accept his disease as brought on by karma. Like Ajahn Fun, Ajahn Juan was healed after a vision he had during a malaria attack. In 1959, when he was 39 years old, Ajahn Juan spent the Rains retreat alone in Jan Tree Cave in the Pink Forest in Nong Khai. The nearest hamlet, whose inhabitants were Kamu, was about 4 kilometers away. Ajahn Mun found the secluded cave and the cool climate conducive to his meditation, so he stayed on in the cave after the rains retreat was over. During the dry season, jungle fever attacked him again. Having no medicine, he let the body heal itself. For a month, fits of fever and shaking attacked him in the afternoons and went away in the evenings. Living alone, Ajahn Mun had to do everything himself. When the fever lessened, he would descend to the foothills to get some drinking water. By the time he got back to the cave, it would be dark. One day, while stricken with fever, Ajahn Mun meditated lying down. As he was about to fall asleep, his father, a highly respected specialist in herbal medicine, who had died when Ajahn Mun was 16, appeared before him. Ajahn Mun recalls that in the vision his father came with a bag of medicine and asked him, "Son, what ails you?" "I came down with a jungle fever a month ago. I haven't recovered. There are no medicines," Ajahn Mun replied. "Well, I'll mix some medicine. You'll recover soon," his father said. Then he untied his bag, scraped the medicine, and mixed it with water. The aroma of the medicine was so inviting that Ajahn Mun felt himself gaining strength just by inhaling. He drank it all. At this point, Ajahn Mun woke up. At first he thought that he had indeed taken his father's medicine. But then, quote, "I realized that it was either a nimitta or a dream. The next day the fever diminished. Then it was gone completely. The body regained its strength and the appetite became normal. I never had a similar reoccurrence of the fever from then on. I don't know why. It can't be because I drank my father's medicine. I didn't really take it. I only drank it in the vision." In any case, Ajahn Mun felt grateful to his father for having looked after him, so he prayed and transferred all the merit that he had accumulated to his parents. Okay, I'll just leave it there for today. Are there any questions that anyone has?
Might be a silly question, but the monks on Tudong, do they travel barefoot? Or because, like, I know when they're going alms rounds, they're barefoot, and so just doing like Tudong.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially, that generation of Tudong monks, I think, going barefoot, I think was, quite, very common, or maybe, pretty much all of them would have gone barefoot. Certainly nowadays, even the Tudong monks in Thailand nowadays, I think, most of them would wear flip-flops just because they're so prevalent and so cheap. But I think, in the old days, actually, like around the time when these monks were wandering Tudong, I think that it was probably actually quite common even for the local villagers, to go barefoot. I think back then, a lot of these stories, are from the early 20th century. I think at that time, even things like shoes or sandals were, tended to be quite rare, more expensive. And a lot of the places where these monks were wandering Tudong, are extremely remote areas, so the villages would have been really, very, very poor villages.
Thank you, Ajahn.
Yeah, so Jack is asking about, I have for most of my life, I have had migraine headaches fairly regularly, so he's asking how I have worked with those. It is really, it is actually quite useful to have these kinds of sicknesses or conditions sometimes that do cause us a lot of pain, particularly with something like a migraine, because it is, it's a very, very, very painful experience, but it's also, something that the body's not really in any danger. And for me, it's kind of like, something that I wouldn't really choose to have that level of pain. But when you're forced to have it, you have to kind of bear with it and figure out how to work with it. And certainly for myself, my experience has been for many years just kind of being overwhelmed by it, really, because the migraines can be quite severe. So it's basically like trying to work with severe pain. For most of us, that's something that's very overwhelming, and I think even for, like the Kruba Ajahns in these stories, probably for them in the beginning, and probably for a long time, it was probably also very overwhelming for them as well. They just had to kind of endure the pain and do the best that they could. And it's kind of like, we do our best to try to learn how to be balanced and at ease in the midst of that pain. But, until we can really be balanced and at ease with small amounts of pain, we probably won't really be able to do that with large amounts of pain. So, working with something like extreme pain, we can say it's like, one of the, ultimate spiritual practices. If the mind can be at peace with severe pain, then we're probably quite close to finishing our work. But for me, certainly for many years, it has been something that I was overwhelmed by. But eventually, it has become something that I've been able to really work with, and it's not, I can't really claim that I can overcome that pain with meditation, but it's like an opportunity to really intensify one's practice and develop mindfulness, in a very strong and intense way. It's the kind of thing that for myself I have, when you're working with pain like that, oftentimes at the during that experience, we maybe don't really see big changes or big huge benefits. It's not like we're able to completely overcome the pain, but I can certainly say that it has gone to the point where practicing with it, the mind suffers far, far less than it used to. So it's kind of like taking it in that direction. And it's also, I found for myself, the kind of strong pain and sickness. I remember asking Lumpur Pasano one time, because I was having the kind of chronic health problems, and asking him, how he dealt with like malaria and the chronic nature of that, and if he found it was useful for his practice. And he said something like, you tend to not really notice the benefits at the time when you're struggling through it, but it's like later you realize that you really grew, or you really benefited from that. So it's kind of having struggled with these kinds of things for a long time, then at some point in the future we realize like the mind has really grown in strength, and it was from really struggling with that kind of pain over a long period of time.